Welcome to the You on the Camino de Santiago podcast, Season 4. This podcast is for and about people getting ready for their first ever pilgrimage on the Camino de Santiago in Spain, France, and Portugal. With your host, Camino guide and longtime pilgrim, Nancy Reynolds of the Camino Experience. Content warning. This episode has a trigger alert, so let me start with that. Hi, this is Nancy, and I want to let you know upfront that we are talking about some difficult topics in this episode, including mental health, suicide, and human trafficking. If you or someone you know is experiencing suicidal thoughts or is in a crisis situation, please know that help is available. If you are in the U.S., you can call 988 from any phone to access the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. If you are outside of the U.S., I have included hotline numbers for the countries where most of my listeners reside. Those are in the show notes, along with a link to a Wikipedia article with numbers for additional countries. To give you some more specifics, my guest in this episode will be sharing his experience with multiple cases of suicide within his immediate circle of friends, his own suicidal ideation, and his career work with safeguarding programs helping victims of human trafficking in the United Kingdom. If these are difficult topics for you, you may want to consider not listening to this episode. Again, help is available. On the other hand, you may find this episode to be incredibly inspiring. I want to mention again, help is available, and you deserve that help. Please reach out to one of the hotlines provided in the show notes or to a trusted friend. My guest is Adam from Sheffield in the United Kingdom. He has learned to talk openly about mental health, and he will be sharing about how walking has saved his life. He will be walking the Camino this year as a way to heal from the traumas of the past years. Let's go ahead and meet Adam. Adam, hi. Thank you so much for being with me on the podcast.
Hi, thank you very much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure. It's a strange one listening to podcasts and really enjoying them, and then being on them. It's so bizarre. It's such a bizarre experience, but it's a really cool one because I absolutely love the podcast. So yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, and thanks for listening and tuning in. It's absolutely my pleasure to produce the podcast and get to talk with people who are getting ready for their first pilgrimage. It's just a kick for me to hear what your stories are and where you're coming from. And when you sent in your interest form to be on the podcast, I just remember being so taken with the significance and the depth of what you deal with and what has brought you towards walking the Camino. So I'm really eager to tell your story and to share that with people. And hopefully people will find some support and inspiration and maybe some help in talking through what we're going to be talking about today. So I know we've got some heavy stuff to come.
Yeah.
But how about we start where I always like to start, which is to put the pin in the map. And if you would share with us when you're going to be walking the Camino, which route, where you'll start and where you'll finish.
Okay, so all of that's a little bit up in the air still. I guess when I'm going to start is so around kind of mid-June, and that kind of hinges on a decision of if I get a job or not. So I'm currently working. I've had an interview last week, and if I get that job, I will find out on Monday, and on that day I will then hand in my notice and say I'm leaving in 3 months, and therefore I'll have a gap between work, which I've never done before. I've never had a gap between jobs. I've always finished on the Friday, started a new job on the Monday. So
Wow.
I'm having what I'm calling 2 weeks fun employment. So 2 weeks off, and with that time, I'm going to, well, I plan to walk from Porto to Santiago. The route, again, this is again a question for later, actually, for you, but I want to do a mix of coastal and central. So, but I don't want to be on the coast too long, maybe 1 or 2 days, and then hop over. So
Okay.
kind of figure that out with yourself and later when I've got my turn to ask questions. If I don't get the job, it'll be September.
Okay.
So I'm doing it this year, and there's been a number of things happen. I'm sure we'll cover um, as to the why now sort of thing with the why I'm taking the pilgrimage now. But there's been a number of things that happened over the last couple of months, couple of weeks, kind of signs that are just like now is the time. Like you have to go now.
You have to go now. Let's talk about that. Why is it now? What's the urgency?
I think I'm ready to go now in terms of my experiences and the kind of grief that I've been dealing with. But I think I'm at a point where I've processed it. Essentially, I lost six friends of mine to suicide over a period of 3 years. It's
Wow.
an
Wow.
incredibly difficult time, and it's taken a lot of time to process and kind of yeah come to terms with it, I guess. So that started in 2020 when my friend Pete took his own life. Um, And then it felt like it was just relentless for 3 years. To lose six friends in that amount of time to suicide was just unbelievable. And all my friends and family were just like, dude, how are you coping? And I wasn't coping.
How are you still standing?
Yeah, yeah. And at times I wasn't.
Yeah. And I remember when I first got that your interest in being on the podcast, I went, I mean, I read it and I was speechless. I was alone. So, that's normal. But I just was so stopped in my tracks is probably the best way to say it. And then even as we're talking, getting ready for this call before we started recording, and you said it again, and I went, and then you just said it now, and I can't process that. What do you do? How does somebody deal with something like that?
Uh, you walk.
You walk. There we go. Okay, now we know why you're on the podcast.
That's why I'm here. Yeah, because of walking. So essentially, I didn't deal with it. I didn't deal with it very
Mm.
well at all. I closed it off. I didn't talk about it. I got upset and I kept I was almost waiting for like who's next. Do you know? It
Oh,
was kind of like whenever I get a text off a friend or a phone call, my friends don't usually like I don't know about your generation, but my generation don't call each other that much. Like and our phones are always on silent, so no one answers anyway. So I usually get text, and then whenever you get a call, you think, why is this person calling me? Like I haven't heard from them for a while. Then I think that I'd automatically just think the worst. Who's done it now, sort of thing. And this I just spiraled over the course of like, I guess during the kind of losing six people in 3 years, but then like for the 6 months to a year after, like the last, I guess the last one passed away. It's a ridiculous thing to say, but there was a kind of it stopped almost, and it was
mm.
for 6 months I was just living in fear of like who's next, who's next. And so I spiraled, and then I started like wondering why and trying to dig into why they made that decision. Was it I couldn't understand the reasons, and I started thinking it must have been, a chemical imbalance in their brain. It can't have been a decision they've made, surely. Like some of my friends who had the world, had beautiful families, had children, had all the things you can imagine you'd want, like the best bike, the nicest house, a great career, and they'd still taken that decision. And I thought, well, there's obviously something just snaps in your brain. And then I started thinking, well, what if it happens to me? And then
Mm.
I went down this spiraling rabbit hole of kind of suicidal thoughts for myself and suicidal ideation for myself and thinking I can't cope with this. I don't want to deal with this anymore. And I can fully understand why they've made the decision now because I feel at the end, I feel like I can't do this and I can't pick myself up from this point. I'm so low. Um, and it's difficult to kind of talk about, but I left the house one evening just after I was just sat and I just felt my whole body was just not in pain, but it just felt like I wanted to escape my skin. Like I didn't want to be in my body. I was just sad. I was sat with my dog, kind of stroking him, and even that was just like it was pointless. And this is rubbish. And I just got up and left. I didn't tell my wife where I was going. She was really worried about me and kind of ringing in. And I said, I'm fine, whatever. And I went out and I just walked with pace. Like I walked with real kind of pace and just it felt like I was kind of walked some of that feeling off. Like my body started to feel a bit normal again. It started to kind of it felt numb before I left the house, and then it started to get my feeling back, and I kind of felt back in my body and a bit more comfortable because I'd spent. And by the time, yeah, I didn't really realize, but I'd spent about 3 hours walking, just, and I'd got so far away from my house as well. I was like, I have to get the bus back, and it's like that was helpful. Like
Mm.
that, I don't know why, but I think I thought about a lot of stuff. I think I was talking out loud at one point. People must have thought I was actually insane. But I was walking and I was going through all the thoughts and processing it, but the movement helped. And so did thinking about stuff. And I thought, like, I'm onto something here. Like, I'm gonna walk more. So I did, and that was great. Um, but walking's fine, but it's not gonna fix me. Like I needed something else. So I looked in.
I would imagine there's more to it. There's more that has to take place to move those thoughts permanently away from the finality of suicide.
Yeah, definitely. And I kind of was missing that piece. It was almost like I found a thread and I'm pulling on it, but
Mm.
I don't know where this leads and I don't know what's at the end, but I'm going to keep pulling. And yeah, I kind of Googled walking therapy,
Mm.
and I was like, oh, there must be something that there must be like a therapist that takes you on hikes. And it turns out there is in my local area. There's someone, she's absolutely wonderful therapist. And she called it outdoor therapy. And it was for all abilities, and it said, if you want to walk, we can walk. If you want to just sit in the woods, we can just sit in the woods. And two things I really absolutely love are walking on woodland. So I spent a lot of my time is spent in the woodland and walking. So I was like, oh, right. So I get to walk long distance through the woodland and in nature and through like the area where I live is something called the Peak District in a national park. It's absolutely beautiful. And it's out there. And I thought, oh, this sounds good. And then I also get to talk about what's going on. So I had this first session of therapy and it was an hour and it felt like 5 minutes.
Oh,
We walked, I don't know how long we'd walked up quite a far way through the woods, and I'd just got everything out. I just told her everything that had happened over the last 3 years, and she hardly said a word. And I said, "Oh, that was great, cool, I'm fixed." And she was like, "No, no, you're not."
you're a really fine therapist. Thank you. Good
Yeah,
work.
yeah. And she was like, "Well, we should probably do another session." And I think 10 sessions later,
Oh, wow.
I was like, "This has been amazing," and I I got to the point where I thought. I know I'm not, it's not finished, and I don't think it will ever be finished. I don't think this feeling will ever leave me, but I can cope with it, and I understand partly why people make that decision, but I also understand that there was nothing I could have done about it to support. And then I also understand that I myself don't have those feelings, and I know if I ever get them, that I've got tools to deal with it. Um, so I kind of said, thank you very much. This has been great. 10 sessions was fantastic and also quite expensive. So I'm going to move on. And what I did after that was because my therapy sessions were on a Wednesday, I told my wife, I said, I'm going to walk every Wednesday. And I call it Wilderness Wednesday. So I just take myself out into the woods or the Peak District up on the hills, out into the countryside, sometimes just around the city. I take my camera and I just walk. And I just walk and I process and I think. And I've done that ever since. So that's been 2 years, a year and a half, 2 years of just every Wednesday, whatever the weather, out walking. And so, yeah, soon after that, I was like, walking's helped me, as is talking, as has been out in nature. So I want to do more of that and I want to do more long distance. So I was going crazy online, like what long distance walks, like I'll find all these things. And like I found a coast to coast in the UK that I wanted to do. And then I, I really like traveling. So I was like, long distance walk, Europe.
Broaden your search.
Yeah. And the
Yeah.
first that popped up was the Camino. And I was kind of like, interesting.
Mm.
This is cool. And that was the start of extensive research, buying books, watching films, watching documentaries, scrolling through YouTube, watching other people's experiences of the Camino, and kind of doing as much research as I could. And I was like, oh, I need to do this. Like, I absolutely need to do this. Um, so yeah, about a year and a half ago, I'd say, but yeah, probably about a year and a half ago, maybe, I was introduced to the Camino, and since then it's just been the objective to
Laser
go.
focused, huh?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's that's kind of a long story of why I got around to doing the Camino. And I guess in terms of why now, is we talk about that job bit when there's a potential there for me to have a 2 week break. So I was like, perfect. And interestingly, the more look into it, the more I think about it, the more I actually start to plan it, things start to pop up and happen. And it's just like it's yeah, and it sounds really cheesy, but the Camino calls you when it's time.
I think so.
I went to an outdoor store with my wife and she was buying a new jacket. And I was like, oh, I need a backpack. I need a new backpack. Mine's old and I probably could do with one for like long hikes and I'll get a bit of a bigger one. So I bought this backpack. It's like cool, it's nice, it's green. I can't remember what brand it is now. But anyway, I got it, bought it, tried it on, great. Took it home. It was in the back of my car for a couple of days, and then I picked it out. And on the bottom of the backpack, it says Air Zone 375 Camino. And I was just like, right, okay, so that's another.
What does that mean?
The bag is it's the bag's called an Air Zone bag. It's I don't know, it's
That's the brand?
Low Alpine is the brand.
Okay.
And the model is Air Zone Camino. The model's
Camino.
Camino. So I was like, oh, that's
Hello, Adam. Adam. Hello, Adam. It's time to walk the Camino. Hello, Adam.
exactly, yeah. And I was like, oh, interesting. And I put something up on my Instagram post of like, is this a sign to walk the Camino? And I put a little poll up and it was 100% yes. So people were like, yeah, just go and do it.
Well, it's interesting when you say yes to something at a really small, in a small, tiny voice. Yes, I think I'll do that. Then there's some power. I don't know, we'll call it God or the universe or whatever, where things just become attracted to that yes.
Yeah.
And then you say, okay, I'll say it a little louder. I'm thinking about walking the Camino, and phew, things start to rush in. And
Yeah,
when you
definitely.
commit, you're in. It's as if
Yeah.
everything lines up and says, let's make this happen.
Yeah, and it does feel like that. I think with the opportunity that's potentially coming my way with this, break in work, and even if not, then it's September anyway, because I've got the
Hmm.
time booked off in September. So
Yeah.
the time has come, and yeah, these little stuff. Now I'm actually planning it. I've bought a few little bits that I think I'll need. I've kind of looked at the route and I've decided on part of a route that I want to do. Um, yeah, things will start to then pop up. So I was at my
Yeah.
friend's parents' house 3, 4 weeks ago, and I was just chatting away, and I mentioned it to her dad, and I said, "Oh, I'm thinking about walking the Camino," and he said, "Oh, what route are you thinking?" I said, "From the Portuguese route, but from Porto," and he was like, "Right, okay, cool. Give me 2 minutes," and he ran upstairs, and he came back down with the John Brearley Camino Portuguese guidebook, and he was like, "I did it 6 years ago. Here's the book. Enjoy."
Perfect.
Well, that's the second sign. That's great. And
Uh-huh.
I was out walking the dog last week, talking to my wife and saying, I'm going to do it because I've not really, I've mentioned it to her and I've said I want to do it. And she's like, yeah, cool, go and do it. Do what you want. That'd be great. Enjoy. And I kind of said, I'm definitely doing it this year. I've made a decision. I'm doing it. And as we were walking, I'd put a different pair of shorts on I've not worn for a while. And I was just like looking for something. I put my hand in the pocket and there was just a €10 note. And I was like, well, oh, now I need to go and spend that, don't I? So
We have to go spend those 10 euros. Those don't do any good in the United Kingdom.
exactly. Yeah, it's useless here. So I've actually written on that note, one beer in Santiago. So that's what it's gonna. That's on my note. I'm gonna
Wow.
carry that the whole way and get a beer at the end. So
And you said it's a 10 euro note?
yeah,
Okay, so I have to wonder how much is a beer in the United Kingdom? Because in Spain on the Camino, you could get a couple for 10 euros.
I mean a couple sounds good. Yeah, you can to be fair. Like it depends what you drink. Like a normal lager will be £3.50, £4.
Okay.
Maybe. So yeah, you could get a couple with that.
All right. So Adam's buying for one person. Adam plus one person gets a beer in Santiago with a 10 euro note.
I hope I build a Camino family of more than
Yeah,
one. Yeah, I'll buy one of them a beer at the end. Yeah.
there you go. When people talk about walking the Camino, they talk about this magic that happens. And one of the things that I think we can attribute it to is some version of that outdoor therapy that you're doing. That people who spend their lives indoors are now outdoors for long periods of time. And we know that's good for you.
Yeah.
And then we walk and we meet people from all around the world and we share our stories. And what's interesting about meeting strangers on the Camino, they don't know your history. And so
Mm.
you can tell any story that you want to. You can get out anything that's troubling you or traumatic or you want to let go of. You can tell the happy stories from your childhood, whatever you want to tell. And so I think you're onto something with that outdoor therapy. that that is a version of what happens on the Camino.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that I can't remember the title of the book, but I did read a book that was around adventure therapy essentially. And it was talking about how that's the thing that you said there, the people who spend their time indoors in offices and then in their houses and in cities are unhappier than people who spend their time outdoors in nature, active. And I think it was the adventure side of it for me that in this book that they really focused on. So I've read another book about forest bathing, which talks about, being in nature and absorbing whatever comes off the trees and all that. So the science behind it. And I was like, oh, that's quite interesting. But this one really added to that. Get out, get active, walk, have an adventure, be excited. And I think that's the thing for me. It's all about endorphins and adrenaline and all that sort of stuff. But this is what it is. I think there's something really key there for promoting positive mental health, and it's everywhere. We see it a lot now. It's get outdoors, get active. It's good for your mind, and yeah. So
We do know that a key part of mental health is having something to look forward to and having something to, we'll say, have something to live for, but to have something that you care about that gets you up every day, gets you out into the world, and gets you engaged. And I think in most cases, we're better off when we are engaged with other people and with those activities.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can't fault it. I think it's perfect, and I think
Yeah.
one thing that came out of the walking therapy, which was really positive, was an event that I planned, and it was around. So I kind of did that. I did the walking therapy, and I thought this is really beneficial, and this has helped me. And but the therapy was great, but the walking and the being in nature bit was for me. I think the key for me in terms of my recovery, like I needed that element of it more than the therapy. For example, the therapy was good
Mm.
at giving me techniques and coping strategies, but actually to maintain positive mental health, the walking and the nature with a key. So I was like, well, how do I share this with others? How do I get people involved and also raise a bit of money for a charity at the same time? So I thought, I want to raise money for the suicide prevention charity called Campaign Against Living Miserably, who supported
Oh,
my friend's family massively. They were absolutely fantastic at supporting my friend's family when he passed away. And so I thought, I want to, raise a couple of £100 for them and organize a walk, like a sponsored walk, like you would when you're at school. You do a sponsored walk in the UK. I'm
yeah.
not sure if you do that in the States, but yeah. So I thought, do a sponsored walk. And then I live near the Peak District. So I was like, okay, hardest walk in the Peak District. And there's a place came up called Kinder Scout Loop, which the Kinder Scout walk is quite a famous walk because it's the first mass trespass against land ownership. Um, and it was this big deal, and loads of people got arrested, but it actually paved the way for access to land so people could then spend time in the countryside and the Peak District without being a crime. So it kind of hit that note, was like, that's cool and a bit historic, but also it's quite a tough walk. It was only, I think, 10 miles, but it's up some of the steepest hills in the Peak District. And I was like, this is a good challenge to do, and I can get a few people involved. I then decided that I was going to do that walk on the 14th of January that year, which is the worst time of year for weather you can possibly imagine, and definitely the worst time to be out in the Peak District. So I organized this walk and I put it on social media and I said, I know this sounds mad, but I'm going to do this really hard walk at the worst time of year. Does anyone want to come?
What a great
And
invitation.
yeah, it's going to be rubbish. Do you want to come with me?
You do need to work on your sales pitch a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit, maybe. Um, and instantly I had like three or four people say, I'm in, I'm down. And I think the people who initially contacted me were also friends who'd been affected by loss through suicide. So from some of the same friends, but then who passed away, but then also their own people who I didn't know. So like, for example, a good friend of mine's brother took his own life, and another good friend of mine's dad took his own life. And suddenly we had this little network of people who were connected by this thing, this by suicide essentially. And all of them were like, I'm in and I'm walking and I'm going to share this fundraiser and raise some money. So I was like, wicked, this is great. Um, and this is probably, I posted it in kind of mid-November time. And I started a WhatsApp group and said, if anyone wants in, just let me know. And it kept growing. And then what I kept seeing is people getting added to the group who I didn't know. And I was like, what is going on? So for
Okay.
this walk that I planned, um, I thought we'd raise maybe £300 for the charity, and maybe five or six people would end up coming. And what happened on the day was 35 people turned up. My brother, my wife, my cousin, people I've been close friends with for a long time, people I know a bit but don't know very well, people I've literally never met before in my life. And we even found a walker who was on his own, who was supposed to be meeting a group who got lost, who was like, "What is this group? And can I join?" And we were like, "Sure thing, pop in." And he then made a donation. But so yeah, we thought it'd be a few five or six people. There was 35. We thought we'd raise £300, 400, whatever. We raised £4,500 for that charity, and I was like, wow. And what happened on that day? So the weather didn't disappoint in terms of my predictions. We had 50 miles an hour winds, rain, consistent rain, sleet, snow, hail. There's a part of the walk which you usually just take a little jump over a stream, which is probably about a foot wide. That stream had now become kind of an 8 foot wide river. So we had to just like walk through it. Like, people were miserable, but what I saw was smiles the whole way. And people who had stories to tell told them on that walk, and people who had stories to tell but didn't want to kept silent for that walk. It was everything to everyone. And also what we saw was people who have never met before helping each other cross a river, for example, or like helping someone with their hood or their jacket or giving them some hot chocolate or something. And it what for me that what that walk did was a it showed everyone the power of walking. And everyone came there who had a story to tell, whether it be they'd lost someone or they'd struggled themselves with their mental health. And there wasn't a face in that pub after. There's a pub at the bottom of the mountain, and there wasn't a face in there that wasn't like beaming with joy. Like they were super happy. And I think for me, it was there's a few things that added to that. There was raising the money was great and felt amazing. Being part of a group felt great and kind of all the support. But it was the walking and it was being outside that everyone kept saying, that was amazing. That was so good. That felt great. And I'm looking at them absolutely drenched, dripping head to toe in water, like they're like emptying their boots out, when the water just comes gushing out the boot. And they're going, wow, that was such a good experience. I had a great time. And I'm like, okay, cool. And yeah, it was incredible. And people from the walk have since done other walks and have now taken up hiking and yeah, I had a few friends who they live in London. I live in Sheffield, so it's 3.5 hour, 4 hour drive. They come up regularly to the Peak District where I live to walk because they were like, it's so good for our mental health.
Yeah.
Walk is so restorative for us. Yeah, it's been really good. So yeah,
Ah, wow. And what you just described, it reminds me of those hard days on the Camino where we all think we want perfect weather and blue sky with puffy white clouds, but it's those horrible weather days that make the experience because that's when we come together. That's when we realize we need each other. And that's when we dig deep to find out what we're made of.
yeah, absolutely. It's kind of through adversity, isn't it? I think
Hmm.
it's a saying. I think calm seas don't make skilled sailors, and
Hmm.
I think there's that through that adversity, through that challenge, you learn a lot about yourself and you grow. And I think that again for me, the Camino is not going to be easy. Like it's going to be a tough walk, both physically and kind of mentally. I've got a lot to process on that walk, and I'm hoping that I come out of it a lot stronger. And yeah, I've already come out of lots of walks stronger and through those difficult challenges, and I feel that I'm in a good place. But I think the Camino is an extra challenge for me in that space to get through and process. So yeah,
You have a lot that you're taking to it and a lot to process through. And I know you shared with me before we started recording about some of your job requirements and some of the stresses and challenges in your work. And there's a lot of moving parts to life in general, and you've got some really tough ones that you're dealing with. Do you want to share anything about that and what you work with professionally?
yeah, I guess so. My I guess my official title is safeguarding lead or safeguarding manager. So safeguarding is, um, I guess it's dealing with anything of an abusive nature. So it's dealing with types of abuse. But the bigger part of safeguarding is all the preparation you do to prevent abuse. So yeah, where I work, it's a national governing body of sport. So I've moved from special needs and intellectual disability education and care in a safeguarding role through into the charity sector, working with asylum services and working with victims of modern slavery and trafficking, and now right through to sport. And one thing that in safeguarding that is key is preventing abuse and
Yeah.
doing everything we can to try and prevent it, to make safe environments for people. So whether that be a school, a care home, um, a centre for people who've been trafficked, or a sporting ground. The principles are the same. We've got to protect those people and keep them safe from abuse. And what that means is I have to develop a framework that does that. So that means design training, make sure that the right awareness is there, make sure that we've done background checks on key roles. So making sure that people who have what's called a responsibility, a position of trust for someone. So if they're in charge of children or people within with an additional vulnerability, that they're the right people to be in the role. It's writing the policies and procedures to make sure that we know what to do if something does happen. So it's massive. It's a huge range of stuff. Yeah, it's an interesting job, but with the nature of it, I'm dealing with disclosures of abuse, and some of that abuse is self-inflicted. So a large part of my work in one of my previous roles was dealing with suicidal ideation and actual like suicide attempts. And this was a daily occurrence at the provision that I was working in at the time. And that for me was really triggering, and it kind of added to the trauma that I was already going through, which then, I got to that rock bottom place that we kind of touched on earlier. Um, but yeah, it's a difficult job, but you I think, like you say, through these things, you kind of find ways to deal with it. You find ways to cope, and actually, the work that we do is is amazing. It's impactful, and it keeps people safe, and it keeps people happy, and it provides safe environments for people, where people can thrive where they hadn't been able to before. If it removes people from abusive situations and makes them safe. So as much as some of it is distressing and whatever, the outcome and the impact of it is well worth its weight in gold. It is such a satisfying feeling to know you've done something to make a difference positively.
And it's absolutely essential work that you're doing.
Yeah, and you know what? It's not a job where it's stressful. It can be really stressful, but it is rewarding. It absolutely is rewarding, and
Sure.
like you say, it's worthwhile when it's one of those jobs where you can I don't know if you get introduced to people at a party and they're like, oh hey, what do you do for a living? And you're like, get ready. Yeah. What I get from those conversations, I feel proud about my work.
Mm,
And that for me is important. It's I'm doing something good. So yeah. But like you say, you carry some of that. And I think,
sure.
yeah, again, walk it off. That's what I say.
Yeah. Well, and it's such a good reminder that mental health means a lot of things. And there is just some basic self care that needs to take place in people who have, regular jobs and don't do those really difficult things all the way to the spectrum of those really hard things that people deal with. We need to attend to our mental health. And
Yeah.
walking is such a good way to do that. So it reminds me to ask, are there any resources that you would share or recommend? What would you say to someone who is struggling? Where can they find help?
Uh, I think the biggest thing for me, the biggest piece of advice would be talk about it to people who can listen. So I've had experience of talking about it to people who can listen, and then I've had experience where I can see that someone isn't comfortable with the situation or the conversation, and maybe they don't have the capacity to deal with that sort of conversation, or maybe they don't have, and it's going to sound harsh, but the emotional intelligence to take that on and
Sure.
kind of give the right response or the response. Um, but what I would say is talk. It's so important to let people know how you're feeling. Um, when I kind of bottled a lot of the stuff up that I was dealing with, losing so many friends, and I didn't want to put that on someone. I didn't want to burden people with it. I didn't want to put it on people, and I kept it all in. And as soon as I put it out there into the ether, as soon as I had a conversation with a friend about like, because he noticed, he was like, "You're not all right. Like, what is going on?"
Mm,
And I was like, "Okay, cool. This is what's going on." And he was like, "Well, I did think you should be struggling more than you were on the surface." And I was like, "Yeah, I've been masking pretty well."
mm,
Um, but as soon as it was out, it felt like a release. It felt like, oh, right, okay, that's better. It's not fixed, but it's definitely better. And what that does for me is it's kind of two parts of talking about it. So the first one is that it's a release, it's out there. It's that just getting it off your chest helps. It just does.
Mm.
Um, but the other part, and this is the part that I'm again proud of and kind of really happy with that it happened, was people see you as someone positive in their life, see you as a role model in their life, or see you as like I don't know, just a mate. And if you have these conversations, it normalizes it. And what that means to people who are struggling, who don't feel they can talk about it, is if they see someone they look up to or they like or they're just mates with talking about it, they feel or it helps them to open up about it a bit more. It normalizes the conversation and it becomes less taboo of a subject. So you get very I know we talked about this before we started recording, but you get very like manly men, like masculine men. And by all means, I am typical masculine man. Like I am 6'1", covered in tattoos, got a beard, ride a Harley Davidson. Like I'm a bloke, what they say in the UK. And I talk very openly about my mental health, in the right arena
Mm.
and in the right and appropriate space. And I see people like me doing that and like people go, "Oh, hang on, but you're supposed to be this big like biker guy who's not scared of anything." Well, I'm scared of loads of stuff, but
Yeah.
what I'm scared to do is open up about my feelings. And I think that it's been such an interesting thing. I'm part of a group. So where I live is a place called Sheffield. I'm part of a group called the Sheffield Dippers. Now they started as a cold water swimming group for men. So it's for men, and it was aimed at men who might be struggling with their mental health. It started with two lads, and I think it's now like 160 people in the WhatsApp group. And I think regularly on every weekend, about 50 people turn up and swim in the cold water. And they also on Sundays go hiking. So it's two parts. It's swim on the Saturday, hike on the Sunday. And in that group are some of the manliest men I've ever seen in my life. Like bears. I mean, we actually had Luke Stoltman, who's one of the world's strongest man. He's in the world's strongest man competition. Messages and say, "Hey, I'm in town for a competition. Can I come and dip with you?" And he just turned
Wow.
like he's the manliest man I've ever seen in my life. He looks like a bus, and he was there, and he was like, "Right, let's talk about our mental health then, lads." And I was like, "Wow."
Wow.
For all the lads in that group to see this man do that,
Yeah.
they were like, okay, so then it's really opened the door for people to say, I'm not all right, I'm struggling, I need help. Where can I find this? What solutions have you got? What have you done that's worked for you? And I'm in this WhatsApp group and it's just back and forth, like, oh, hey, have you tried this? I'm always like, hey, what I'm gonna say? Try walking.
Try walking. Go
Like,
do it.
and then, additional things that I kind of suggest, obviously reaching out to people. Um, I can't fault the services that are available, the charities that are there. The charity that we raise money for, Campaign Against Living Miserably in the UK, is one of the leading suicide prevention charities, doing a lot of research, but also support for families, which has been incredible for, like I said, a couple of my friends actually, for their families. They were superb. So there are places for where you can reach out. As soon as you Google um, if you Google the word suicide, the helplines pop up straight away. Um, they're useful. And again, if you haven't got a friend to talk to, or you don't feel comfortable talking to someone there's someone impartial at the end of a phone with a free phone line where you can ring them. And I'm sure that's international as well. There are countries that will be doing that, not just the UK. So yeah, in terms of advice, talk and walk. Mine too.
Right. Oh, I really appreciate that. It just reminds me that we're just all a bunch of marshmallows on the inside.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Thanks for sharing that. And I don't know if it took courage for you to share that today or share that when you sort of brought out your own feelings when that started to happen. But to me, that looks very courageous. And I just really applaud you for that authenticity.
Yeah, I think, like I said, the more I talk about it, the more it might, if it helps one person,
Mhm.
then it's worth it, isn't it? I mean, if
Yeah, I
I,
bet
if
it
I
will.
can openly say, yeah, I've struggled and I've done these things, and now I feel in a space where I'm happy, I'm like thriving and happy and comfortable and feel safe. If that helps, someone listens to this and goes, oh, I'm going to try that, and then feels
Yeah.
better, then I'm onto a winner. And I'm an open book with it. There's no shame in it. There shouldn't be any shame around mental health. It shouldn't be a taboo subject. It shouldn't be something we are worried about talking about. And yeah, there you go. Talk about it.
Ah, that's great. Yeah. I know for me, if a friend comes to me and says, hey, I'm really struggling, can we talk? I am absolutely honored and ready to go. I love that. I love that someone would trust me and let's talk. So it actually feels like, I don't know, kind of strange to say it, but sort of a gift to me to be able to witness that and to hear and support a friend, someone I love.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
absolutely.
I appreciate that. And I can only assume that the people close to me feel the same, that they'd want to know if I was really struggling. Yeah. And I have a couple times in life,
Yeah,
just a couple.
yeah. I think everyone struggles at some point in their life.
Yes.
It doesn't need to be as drastic as someone else's story, but it's for me, it's all relative, isn't it? It's relative to
Yes.
what you're used to. Um, and you know, just reach out, just have a chat about it because it's
Yeah.
probably not as bad as you think either. Some of the times, like there's some things that I'll just roll around in my head and be like, oh no, this is awful, this is like catastrophic, and then I'll mention it to someone and they'll be like, no, that's not even bad. Like if you tried this and oh, it's fixed, right? Okay, cool. Like you feel a bit
Right.
silly after it, but
Boy, left to our own devices, our minds can be very dark neighborhoods.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate that. And you know what I'm going to do is collect some hotline numbers and put them in the show notes so people from
Well,
different countries have those. Uh, it might not be the first place you'd look when you're having a difficult time, but if you're listening to this episode at that moment, check the show
yeah.
notes and let's get you some help. Yeah.
Because these things and they can be triggering. You can listen to a conversation like this and go, oh, actually, that sounds familiar.
Hmm.
That's me. And
Hmm.
they can't even realize it. And then all of a sudden it hits them. So yeah, absolutely have them available for people. That's the best thing. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for that, Adam. I really
Yeah,
appreciate the
thank you.
conversation. Shall we talk more about your Camino now?
Oh yeah.
All right. Do you have some questions for me?
Yeah, a few.
Let's do it.
Okay, so first I'm looking at the Portuguese or the Porto to Santiago route. And I want to cross from coastal to central, and I don't know where is best.
Mm,
I don't know where's best. Maybe I want maybe somewhere between like 1, 2, 3 days at coast and then cross over. And I've seen so many things online about where to cross, where's best, how not to do it, where to do it, and I'm just confused.
mm.
So I think, yeah,
Well, part of that I think is the innate desire to want to get it right and to not miss out on anything and to have it be the best possible option because this may never come again.
yeah,
And I think the first thing to do is just to see if you can let go of that. Let
okay,
go of the idea that there's a right way or a best way.
okay,
Because what happens when you're on the Camino, you start walking and you get into a rhythm. You meet people, you get into conversations, you find people who you just immediately love and wonder where they've been all your life. You find other people who you wonder if you could get away from them fast enough. It's like anywhere in life, people press your buttons and you don't want your
yeah.
buttons pressed.
I hope I'm not that person.
No, I have a feeling you won't be. I have a feeling you'll be the one attracting people. Who is this guy? Yeah. Yeah. And the stories that you have to tell. But yeah, so the way that I often recommend people approach it is first of all, figure out how far you want to walk in a day on average. You don't have to dial that in perfectly, whether that's 20 kilometers, 30 kilometers a day. And then you can plan some stages using the guidebooks. And then as you look at that and as you map it out, see if you can let go of the idea that it has to be right or that there's a best way to do it.
Okay.
And trust yourself
Yeah.
and trust the journey.
I've, it's so strange for me to be there. I think because I've overthought it.
Mhm.
It's been on my mind for a year and a half. So I've done
Yeah.
extensive research, and now I'm like, there's so much out there.
Hmm.
And I'm not a planner usually. Like when I first thought about doing this, I was literally just going to get a plane ticket and just
Hmm.
see what happened. And I've
Yeah.
done this before where I've ridden my bike around Europe a couple of times, and I've only ever booked the first night accommodation, and then just saw what happened. So, uh,
Sure.
and I was like, oh, this is great, and I'll go here and I'll go there and I'll go with these people. And I wanted to approach this in the same way, but now I've like overplanned it. I think
Mm,
I need
mm,
to let go of that. Like, yeah, like you say,
yeah. And the thing about overthinking, some of us actually enjoy it. It's fun. I love to think and I love to think through and all of that. I have to remind myself that I'm just enjoying that activity, but I don't actually have to do any of what I just thought about.
okay, yeah,
It's a separate event. The thinking
yeah,
part is like, woo, my brain's going, doing gymnastics and having a good time. it might not have anything to do with what I actually end up doing. So you can do both. You can
Okay.
overthink, do it, and then, get a clean piece of paper and then figure out what you're going to do.
Okay. Thanks. That's helpful.
Yeah.
I mean, I've written out 3 different routes of what I think will be good. But as you say, I'll probably just go and be like, oh, I'll put them in the bin and just go with whatever.
Yeah. Oh, look, I like the look of that building or that bar over there. I
Yeah.
think I'll go this way.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
know I want at least one full day with the sea on my left.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, just one full day. So I want to head out of Porto on with the sea to my left. I want to do that because I've seen it so many times on different YouTube videos and all bits and bobs. So
Yeah. See what it feels like
yeah,
because you've
yeah,
only seen it. You've only visually seen it. You haven't felt the breeze on your skin and
yeah.
the wind in your hair and all of that. Yeah. So go experience it and see if it's everything you thought it would be.
Thank you. Yeah.
Mm.
Um, the other question I had, there's a couple of more questions I had. One was because I'm walking in June, late mid to late June, probably, hopefully, fingers crossed. It's going to be hot, like
Hmm.
real hot. So there's the whole boots versus trainers dilemma, and I've decided that it's trail running trainers that I'm going with.
Yeah.
The
Good.
route's not too arduous. It's cobbles mainly and a few hills and a bit of dirt, but nothing kind of crazy. So I've decided on that. But in terms of walking times, I was thinking of like getting up super early and walking till about midday, and
Hmm.
then kind of hopefully getting to where I want to be. Is that a sensible way of doing it, do you think?
That's the way a lot of people do it in the hot times. Yeah. So one question to ask yourself and decide is, do you want to walk in the dark? Do you want to get up that early so that you are actually walking in the dark? Walking into the sunrise is magical, and
Yeah.
people report that that's the most significant part of their journeys.
Okay.
If you're walking in the dark, it's a good idea to have a headlamp or some
Okay.
other source of light. So just so you can see the trail markers
Yeah.
and make sure that you're actually on the trail. And, wandering off isn't a horrible thing. You'll get back. You're on foot. You can't get
Yeah.
too far off the trail. But yeah. And then the other thing that I do is I check the weather forecast. I have an app that shows me the temperature trajectory for the day so that you can find out when it's at peak heat. And then your goal is to be done well before peak heat.
Yeah.
And in Spain and Portugal are off the times by 1 hour. And so
Right.
it actually gets hotter later in Spain,
Okay, yeah.
according to the clock. And
Okay.
so you just look at that. I think the peak heat of the day is 4 or 5 in the afternoon in Spain.
Okay.
In Portugal, it would be an hour earlier. So, I may be mixing those up, but you'll double check it and see what actually goes on. But yeah, so look at when it's peak heat and just know that you want to be done well before that.
Yeah. That's really good because in my brain I was kind of thinking I've got to be done by 1 p.m.
You probably do want to be. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So that yeah,
And
that seems about right with the mileage that I want to do every day.
mhm.
Roughly 15 miles, so like 23K a
Yeah,
day,
it sounds
roughly.
good.
Um,
Yeah, probably take you 5 hours of walking, maybe. You probably have long legs. So
but yeah,
five
yeah.
hours walking plus breaks. So if you get on the trail by 7, even, you'll be done by 12 or 1.
I really like the idea of sunrise walks,
Mm,
but I don't like the
yeah.
idea of getting up really early. But
Yeah.
swings and roundabouts. But,
Here's the fun thing. If you're staying in the albergues, you won't be the first one up. So
okay,
people
cool.
start to get up really early, especially when it's hot. And
Yeah.
unless you're a really sound sleeper, you're going to be woken up.
Okay, so
Yeah.
on the albergues, I'm alberguing all the way.
Okay.
What I want to experience, and I've got this vision of what it's going to be like. The whole thing. I've kind of walked the whole thing already in my head so many times,
Okay.
but it'll be different. I know it will. But yeah, albergue is definitely the one. I've got really good earplugs.
Great. Good
Heard about
call.
the scoring. Um, so yeah, I'm kind of prepped for that, and I think I will be staying there. But even with them, there'll be people getting up, lights going on, people banging into stuff, and I'm
Yes.
prepared for it. I don't mind. So yeah, that's really cool. Thank you.
Mm.
Um, and then getting credentials was my other
Mm.
kind of thing. So I know you can buy them online,
Yes.
and I kind of thought, well, depending on flights and what time I get into Porto, I could go to the cathedral. But then if I
Hmm.
get there on a day where it's not open, or it's kind of the option. So I was going to ask you, like, what would you recommend? Would you get one previous? Would you get one prepared so you've got it online and it's ready, or would you just kind of chance it and find one there?
I do both.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I would do both. And the reason I do both is there are different credentials available.
Right.
Every country has a different one. And so the one that you order from, say, the Confraternity of St. James out of London is going to be a different credential than the one you would get in Porto.
Right.
It's
Okay.
different from the one you get in Saint-Jean-Pied-du-Port if you're walking the Frances route. It's different from the one that you would get even in Tui or Sarria if you're starting within Spain. And so I started collecting them over the years. And so it might be kind of fun to order the one from the confraternity in London. And
Okay.
then when you get to Porto, if you can get one, if it's open, get one of the ones from the Portuguese route. And then you have the choice of collecting a lot of stamps. You can fill up as many of these as you want to. Sometimes what people do is they'll take one credential and use it to qualify for the Compostela. So they'll just get one stamp a day until they get to the final 100 kilometers when you're required to have two stamps a day. And then the extra credential, they get stamped everywhere: bars, restaurants, hotels, cafes, churches, everything, and keep that as a souvenir.
Okay. Is
Yeah.
it correct that you have to hand it in at the end to get your Compostela? Is
You
that
show it.
you show it?
You get it back. Yeah. You just show it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think yeah, getting both is I've not thought of that. I don't know why, but
Yeah.
yeah.
More is
Excellent.
more.
Great. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
No more questions from me. Yeah, good.
Great. Now you mentioned frustrations. Any other frustrations in getting ready that you'd like to share?
I mean, the first one was trying to decide on a route,
Yeah.
and I'm not there. But I think, what you've said hit home a bit in terms of like how I am usually is just I go with the flow and I just go with whatever. So I think when I'm actually there, I will just go with it and see what happens. But in my brain, I'm like, I need to know where I'm going. But I don't think I do.
It could be that just where you are in life right now, your brain needs that activity. It needs the
Yeah,
planning and the process and the let's see if we can find some certainty in this process just for the exercise of it. But like I
yeah,
said earlier, you can still just let that go when you're ready to.
yeah. So I think yeah, that was one. And the other frustration for me has been information overload,
Yeah.
specifically on Facebook as well.
Hmm.
So I'm in a couple of groups on Facebook, and they're great and they're really informative, but there's so much out there
There
that
is.
I'm just kind of almost drowning in it, and I need to take a step back, I think. The one thing that I've seen that's been a little bit disappointing actually was Facebook, and some of the kind of comments from people and people asking for advice and saying, "Oh, hey, I'm here and I need this," or and then just negativity. And I thought that isn't in the spirit of the Camino for me. Like I want it to be positive, and if I don't know what to do with those like kind of bad vibes, like if people are going to be, I mean, people are how they are, and everyone's different, and people's way of communication online is very different to how it is in person a lot of the
Mm.
time.
Mhm.
But it's frustrating when I've asked what I feel to be kind of yes or no questions or like kind of just advice questions, and you get so many different views, points of views, so many different opinions, and then just people being quite rude. But you
Yeah.
know, I think that for me is my only. There's not been any kind of frustrations in terms of actually planning it. Like I know what kit I need, and I'm prepared to walk the distances. Um, the flights are really simple. Accommodation is whatever I find when I get there. So I'm not like frustrated about that, but I think yeah, just when I've been looking for information, you kind of you Google something like I don't know albergate in such an area, and then you'll get so many different people telling you what you should and shouldn't do, and I think that's been a little bit frustrating. So,
Hmm.
but I think
Yeah.
I've been able to step back from it.
Yeah. It's a lot of noise, really.
Yeah,
And I think that's sort of the nature of social media anyway. And then you get people on there who have walked once and see themselves as an expert, which you are. You are absolutely an expert on your own Camino. And then you get people who have walked multiple times who are a little bit more authoritative. And then you get people who, maybe have just been waiting for the chance to mouth off or to voice their opinion. It's like anywhere, right?
yeah,
And I think the good news is that once you get on the Camino, a lot of that noise goes away.
okay, good.
And I think part of it is because the people who have already walked it aren't there. There's some people who are repeat pilgrims, but when you get onto the trail, you will be surrounded by many first time pilgrims who are also still in that place of wonder and questioning and uncertainty and in some cases fear.
Yeah,
And so you get into that energy. They can't judge you because they don't want to be judged. They want to
yeah,
be exactly the way you are, like just a big sponge and be a part of the experience. So I think things quiet down because the audience changes.
That's good. The one thing that stuck out to me and is you've used this term before on your podcast, but that proper pilgrim, or that's not, like people not doing it properly.
True pilgrim.
True pilgrim, yeah. And
Hmm.
someone put a thing on Facebook saying, "Hey, like I'm really struggling with carrying my backpack. What are the transport options from point A to point B?" Loads of helpful people said, "This company do it. Ring this number. These guys are great." And there was probably about 5 or 6 people who've been like, "You can't carry your own backpack. You're not a true pilgrim if you can't do that. You haven't completed the pilgrimage properly if you've not." And I just think, oh, why are you here?
You know what I love to do with those people? I love to say, oh, really? Why? Why is that? Where does that idea come from? I mean, and I'm really curious, where does that idea come from? And I think, I don't know. I say, I think I know. I don't know. But one thing I have observed is that people walk the Camino the way they walk it. And then they think that that is the best way to walk it.
Yeah,
So if you walked alone, if you started alone and did a solo pilgrimage, you're going to think that's the best way because that was transformational for you.
yeah,
If you carried your backpack the whole way, you struggled, you had that experience. It's an incredible experience to carry your backpack the whole way. Incredibly informative and transformational to have that experience. And while I'm on the trail carrying my backpack and my body's hurting and I'm tired and I'm looking at somebody who isn't carrying their backpack, laughing and smiling and having a good time at the bar, human nature, I'm going to start judging them and thinking they're not true pilgrims.
yeah,
But I have no idea what's going on in their heart or their heads.
yeah,
And so now I go back on Facebook and I'm like, well, this is what I observed. If you didn't carry your backpack, those people weren't true pilgrims. And yeah, there probably were some people on the Camino who weren't carrying their backpacks who don't call themselves pilgrims. They're just on the Camino.
yeah,
But to talk to a first time pilgrim about it that way, I think is unfair.
yeah. Agreed. They were my only real
Yeah.
frustrations. Nothing in terms of actually preparing apart from just trying to figure out which way to go, which is
Yeah.
not. So it's not that hard.
Yeah. Just turn down
Yeah.
the noise. I think that's the solution.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
cool. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So let's imagine you in Santiago. You've completed the pilgrimage. You've walked from Porto through Portugal on whichever perfect route you chose. You walked through Spain and now you're in Santiago de Compostela in front of the cathedral. What are you thinking and feeling?
Uh, if I'm honest, I'm probably gonna cry. Um, because this journey is for me not an end to the stuff that I've been through and the kind of the subject we've talked about, but I'm kind of saying goodbye to it. I've got to a place where I'm not okay. I'm okay about it, but like no, I'm not okay about it. I understand it. Okay,
Mm,
so I can deal with it. I've processed it, and I want to kind of put it to bed,
mm.
and I want to move on to the next part of my life, on my journey, on my story. So the Camino has now become this like closure walk where I'm going to spend 2 weeks thinking about each one of my friends and the time we spent together and the journey we had.
Yeah.
Even like physically putting that down. So like my thought is to carry 6 rocks
Mm,
um, with the names on. I'm gonna actually carve the names in so they stay there forever,
mm,
um, and place them down when I feel ready to. So whether or not I place them all down or at one time or like put one down and that's the end of that journey for us and them. And it kind of feels like I'm taking them with me, and I'm saying goodbye properly because I never got the chance to. So I think there's going to be a lot of emotion at that finish line and a
sure.
lot of relief, I think, hopefully. So yeah, I mean, I'll also be excited to have a rest day because I've not planned any in for my walk. I've just like 14 days, like 13 days straight walking, one rest day at the end, go home. Um,
It's a lot.
yeah, well, I mean, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, so I think that for me it'll be relief, and a huge kind of like almost a weight lifted. Um, but I don't know because I'm so full of expectation of what this walk's going to be for me.
Mm,
As I said, I've watched so many YouTube videos. I've watched The Way, I think 3 times in the past like 2 months or something. Like my wife's like, "Did you watch this like 2 weeks ago?" And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
on again
yeah.
now." So, and I know that's not the same route. Yeah, I know it's not the same route, but it's the same essence, isn't it? It's the same
Mm,
thing. It's a pilgrimage, and it's a journey of one man's grief and his kind of way through it and what the walk did for him. So I've got this expectation of what it's going to look like, what it's going to feel like, what the people are going to be like that I'm going to meet, and none of that probably will come true. Like it'll be so different. So
yeah.
I kind of thought about this question when, when you're at the start of the walk, how you're going to feel. And I was like full of expectation. I know in my head how it's going to be, but actually it's not going to be like that at all. But so yeah, I'll get to the end and it'll be completely different to how I visualized it. And it'll be utterly perfect, whatever
Mm,
happens.
yes.
And yeah, I think I'll be a little lighter at the end of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd like to do sort of a ritual or a process at the beginning of arriving into your body where your feet are on the ground. And if you can, if you need to journal or just say it out loud or meditate or something, to actually separate what came before from the starting point so that what you pay attention to right now is only the experience that's happening. And if the experience is different from a video you saw, if it's different from the guidebook you read, trust the experience.
Yeah,
That's what you've got on this walk.
sounds good.
Mm.
Sounds perfect. Yeah, it's going to be tough, but it's going to be amazing.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear how it goes.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah, Adam, really absolutely a pleasure to spend time with you and to hear your story, to bear witness to that, and to see your Camino journey get started.
thank you. It's been a pleasure. It's been really fun talking to you. Like meeting a celebrity. It's weird.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Uh, I don't know what to,
Yeah, take it however you want.
I still don't see myself as a celebrity. Yeah.
I mean, I think what your podcast has done for me. I mean, this probably does this for so many people. What it's done for me is inspired me to actually take the step to go, and also helped me to understand what I need to do to get there. So a lot of people's previous questions have been very like practical based. Like, what do I do here? What sort of thing do I need this? And I don't need to do the research because it's already done through your podcast. So I've kind of
Right.
by listening, I know what I'm doing, and then to be part of it is like, oh, okay, great. It's that
Yeah.
next
Thank
step.
you.
So, yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Yeah, you know how it is when you set out to do something and it actually happens, it works. And so for me to hear that is validation that my vision has come to be. This is what I wanted to give to the Pilgrim community. So thank you for saying that.
Again, thank you. Keep going.
I will. Absolutely. You as well.
Thank
All
you.
right, Adam, thanks.
Cheers. Bye bye.